Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome back. This is HeartBrief, the short but important video with three major papers that were presented in the last week, published in peer-reviewed circulations. I am Joel Kahn, medical doctor, triple board certified preventive cardiologist, clinical professor of medicine, author, and podcaster. So let's get going. And if you happen to see my previous episode, I'm now 9 days status post robotic mitral valve repair, recovering very well. Going to see some patients in the clinic this week and go back to full time next week. Thank you to the Cleveland Clinic team for pulling that off. Yeah, no complications, fortunately, so far. And I'll give a finger crossed right there. All right, let me do the share button. Looks like this is going to work. Yay. All right, so we are going to talk about an article just published in Lancet, as you know, generally a very respected journal, a version of Lancet called eClinicalMedicine 2026, out of Stockholm in the Karolinska Institute. Long COVID and the risk of incident cardiovascular disease, a prospective cohort study using the Miracle S cohort. And there has been concern that certainly everybody's heard about concern about the COVID mRNA vaccine and the risk of myocarditis and occasionally other cardiovascular syndromes like hypertension, arrhythmia, atrial fibrillation. But this database is looking at the disease, the infection called COVID, and those that appear to develop a long version with ongoing symptoms, something I do see in my clinic. And the development in comparison to those that don't have long COVID of conditions like heart attack, heart failure, arrhythmia, stroke, and peripheral arterial disease. And they were able to assay a database of over 1 million individuals. They judged that under 1% of them carried a diagnosis of long COVID, 8,999, 66% women. The incidence of any cardiovascular event was higher in the long COVID group. Women had an 18% risk, men a 21% incidence, actually. Compared with a control group, there was about half of that per gender. Long COVID was associated with cardiovascular outcomes that were increased, including cardiac arrhythmia, coronary disease events, heart failure events in women, and peripheral arterial disease events, some of which could be explained by excessive blood clotting from injury to the endothelium from the spike protein, although that's a mechanistic jump I'm taking that was not actually research performed. So their conclusion, important to those of us in practice seeing patients, long COVID is associated with an increased risk of incident cardiovascular disease, particularly cardiac arrhythmia, heart failure, and coronary disease. These findings underscore the need for systematic follow-up and integration of long COVID into cardiovascular risk assessment. And I will say in my clinic, in the last 6 years, everybody gets asked, have you had COVID? How many times? Emergency room, hospital, monoclonal antibody, Paxlovid, how are you treated? And also how many injections of the vaccine they took. And we try and give them guidance. Of course, some of the labs like Quest and LabCorp offer a quantitative antibody to the spike protein. You can't determine from that alone if it's coming from a prior infection or exposure to the vaccine, but it should be very low, and certainly it's very high in many, many people. Okay, so we are going to go back. Hang with me here, technology. I need a robot to do this. Don't we all need a robot to do this? I think so. All right, here we go. International Journal of Public Health, March 2026. Moderate wine consumption, defined by the Mediterranean diet, is associated with delayed biological aging in men from the MOLI-SANI study. The MOLI-SANI is a nutrition study in Italy, been going on for a very long time. It's very large. It's observational. It's not a randomized study. Most of nutrition research is observational databases, and you have to put them all together. Nobody teaches that better than the Professor Walter Longo, Longo, at University of Southern California. But in this database with 22,495 men, there were some that didn't drink ever. There were some that were former drinkers. There were some that were moderate drinkers, basically 2 glasses a day or less for a man, one glass a day or less for a woman, or drinking as part of the Mediterranean diet, similar amounts roughly. And then there were the heavy drinkers, those that exceeded those limits. And they used a deep neural network of 36 circulating biomarkers to calculate an index of biological aging. What they find in men, wine consumption at moderate doses, as would typically be part of the Mediterranean diet, was associated with slower biological aging. And there was a dose response curve until you got to the very high levels. And that is one of what's called the Bradford Hill criteria, a dose response curve, to believe there actually might be causation between wine intake and lower biological aging. So their conclusion was moderate wine consumption, but not overall ethanol intake, beer and cider and others, may contribute to slower biological aging in men. So this is always controversial. We put it out there. This is figure one with the graph showing there's a dip in biological age, then it goes up if you drink excessively. And certainly, we are not recommending that people overdo it or begin drinking or take great comfort in this. Only it is science, and it's fair to present it to you here at HeartBrief, brought to you by Cardio Care Today. Okay, one more, because we typically do three, and so far my energy level is hanging in there, right? All right, this is a big one, and there's no way to do it justice in a HeartBrief video, but we have to talk about it. We got the food pyramid of USDA and FDA and Bobby Kennedy and Marty McCary and the others about 2 months ago now. A lot of pushback on it with the high prominence of whole fat dairy, more meat at the top of the pyramid. Everybody likes the real food concept for sure, as opposed to ultra processed food. So the American Heart Association updated, I think it was 2021 guidelines just this week, the 2026 dietary guidance to improve cardiovascular health. Some very prominent people on this panel, Daniel Jones, a cardiologist, Chris Gardner, PhD from Stanford, Frank Yu, MD, PhD from Harvard, Amit Kara, MD, I believe he is from, and I also believe it's a he, University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. And they came up with 9 points of a heart-healthy diet. It's quite different than the MAHA pyramid. Number one, adjust your energy intake and expenditure to achieve a healthy body weight. Okay, we can all agree with that. Visceral fat is dangerous. Number two, eat plenty of vegetables and fruits and choose a wide variety. We can agree on that. Number three, choose foods made mostly with whole grains rather than refined grains. Goodbye donut, goodbye bagel. Hello, whole grain pasta bread. Number four, choose healthy sources of protein. And you'll see they emphasize plant protein the most. Legumes, beans, peas, lentils. Mediterranean diet again. Number five, choose sources of unsaturated fats in place of sources of saturated fat. In fact, on social media, one of the most followed MDs in America, his first name is Mark. I'll let you figure out the last name, somebody I know pretty well, posted what he ate 3 meals a day at age 66. He didn't calculate his calorie content, his macronutrients, but oh my God, with meat twice a day and eggs and everything else, his saturated fat content would have been way beyond the USD pyramid. He didn't talk about that. I wouldn't recommend it to a heart patient. So unsaturated fats in place of saturated fats. Number six, choose minimally processed foods. Number seven, minimize intake of added sugars in beverage and food. Number eight, reduce sodium. And number nine, here it is. If alcohol is not consumed, do not start. And if it's consumed, limit it. And their central figure, I think you can see it here on the sharing screen, is to choose in the green and minimize in the red. And I mean, this is going to be universally accepted. Who's going to argue with anything here? But it is different than what we're talking about from the USDA and such. So I just want to get, here we go. Under protein, you can see feature 4, choose healthy source of protein. Shift from meat to plant sources, legumes and nuts for protein. Regularly consume fish and seafood. No problem there. I don't do it, but no problem there. Select low fat or fat free dairy instead of full fat dairy. And finally, over there to the right, if red meat is desired, choose lean cuts, avoid processed forms, and limit portion size. So I think, again, we'll go back to the figure. It's so beautiful and leave it there. So I really encourage you to take a look at this document. I didn't point out, published in Circulation, the Journal of the American Heart Association. Very long paper. I'm not sure so long. I think it's about 11 pages. So I don't want to scare you away from it. If you want to read the whole article, it's a very good reference to have in your clinical practice with patients. If you send out newsletters, emails, you have a website, might be going to post. So thank you for being with me. 9 days post mitral valve repair. Robotic. I didn't have a sternotomy. If I wasn't wearing a t-shirt underneath, you can see no sternotomy. Miracle. And on the other hand, I have 10 holes from my internal jugular vein down to my femoral artery and femoral vein, and a whole bunch of them over my right thorax to accomplish robotic mitral valve repair. It's all healing up. To say it's painless would be a gross underestimate. But you have a wonderful day, and thank you for being here.